So, Jordan Addison is in the transfer portal. Can somebody please tell me Miami has a chance?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host of Locked On Canes, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, University of Miami alumni, post-game host on the Canes Radio Network, and I'm so proud and happy to bring in very good friend of ours who talks recruiting. And let me also say thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen each and every day. We're available free wherever you get your pods, and available this week on YouTube as well. So you don't just get to hear me, you get to see my handsome face as well. And you get to see John Garcia Jr.'s handsome face, Director of Football Recruiting at Sports Illustrated. John, how are you, sir? Welcome back.
I'm doing well. Always good to be back on with the Hometown Podcast. It's been a crazy week, but I guess every week is like that now, right? There's no more dull period in college football or recruiting anymore. So I'm here for it, although, it is a lot.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we're going to talk about everything going on as well with NIL in a couple minutes. But I want to start with the transfer portal. You've been our good luck charm, John, because it seems like every time we bring you on, like within the next 3 days, Miami gets like 3 players in the portal. So I don't know if maybe something will happen here with Jordan Addison, the highly touted wide receiver from Pittsburgh, who's in the portal now. And a lot of competition out there. The last that I saw on Addison, he's over in Southern California training with Bryce Young, which gets Bama fans excited. Of course, the fact that he's in Southern California gets USC fans excited. And I've been led to believe, John, and I'm sure this stuff can change by the minute, but I've been led to believe that USC is the favorite. Do you agree with that? And do you think Miami is at least in the mix here?
I agree with both, Alex. I do think that USC is the favorite, and there could be a margin there, or at least into the week, it felt like there was a margin there with USC. Look, he's a DMV area guy, just like Caleb Williams. Everybody knows that he's kind of the driving force. Him and his camp are the driving force for a lot of these high-profile USC transfers. So I do think that connection resonates, but since that point, I was told about Texas and Bama, Miami and Oregon. LSU was thrown in there today in a text message, and I was like, well, I get why all these programs would reach out to Jordan Addison. He's only the Biletnikov Award winner who caught 100 passes last year for an ACC championship team. But in terms of who's in the driver's seat, I do still think it's USC, but certainly working out with Bryce Young does make me think that Nick Saban's going to have a say before all is said and done. But if it continues to draw out, and I think this is the key here, the timeline, right? That's the most important thing with all recruits and transfer portal guys too. It's the timeline. The sooner he decides, to me, the more likely USC. The longer it draws out, then Bama, Texas, Miami, that kind of group, that collective begins to pick up momentum, because then he can take visits and actually explore and sit down and truly see what those schools have to offer, including, I guess, in NIL, which is going to come up inevitably.
Yeah, and like I look at it, even disregarding the NIL stuff for a moment. Obviously, I'm a little bit greedy here from a Miami perspective. I think there are a number of destinations that could make sense for him. It seems like Miami could make some sense, given that there's definitely a need for a wide receiver like him. Like this is the case in most places. He walks right into Miami and starts, but Tyler Van Dyke, I've seen him projected as maybe a top 10 draft pick next year after the year he had. You'd feel pretty comfortable about TBD throwing him the football. So, yeah, I feel like Miami could be a fit there. Something that I was talking a little bit about in yesterday's episode, John. I don't know how much stock I put into this, but I did hear one report, and it wasn't from you, but I did hear one report claiming that, he didn't necessarily want to stay in the ACC, that maybe he wanted to, go to a different conference, especially not staying in the Coastal. Do you think that may factor in his decision?
I think so. The first phone call I got this week about Jordan was about the potential to maybe stay at Pitt amidst all of this. So I do think there is some loyalty to Pitt and Pat Narduzzi in particular. I think it's well publicized by now that Narduzzi has been on the phone with at least one prominent coach about how he disagrees with this entire process. So if through all of that, Jordan ends up in the same division and Pitt has to play them. I mean, I do think that would be optically tough of a hurdle for him to get over. But I think him just being in the portal anyway has been something optically tough. And there's kind of been a lot on his plate, which is why going back to his timeline, I could see this thing drawing out a little bit more, because this is one decision that is, by default, because of the calendar, it's going to be the lightning rod moment of the offseason, it feels like. So I do think there is a reason for him to take his time with this decision, because regardless, there's going to be scrutiny. Regardless, there's going to be a lot of conversations around it. So I do think that optically going into the ACC and into the Coastal in particular is tough to look at from 30,000 feet. But look, those around Jordan have kind of hinted at, hey, this is about Jordan. This is about his draft stock. It's about his profile. It's about upping it to the highest level without Kenny Pickett, without the receivers coach who's now at Texas, which is why that connection exists, without the offensive coordinator, Mark Whipple. He's gone as well. So I think all of those things factor in to this conversation. And if it truly becomes all about Jordan, then some of those optical factors don't matter as much, because it's about, a 6 or 7 month deal at one of these programs in order to propel himself that much higher, at least in his eyes, towards Sundays.
Speaking of draft stock, Miami had a pretty disappointing weekend, and I was kind of expecting it. That's why I didn't spend a whole lot of time previewing the draft from a Hurricanes perspective last week, but they end up with only one guy drafted, John Ford, 7th round to Green Bay. And like I said on Monday's episode, that's why Miami needed to go out and get a guy like Mario Cristobal, that you can't let drafts like that happen again. And for somebody like you, John, that covers recruiting for a living, like I'm right to think that, even during, the Manny Diaz era, even like going back to the Al Golden days, like the recruiting wasn't that bad. Do you feel like the disconnect was more from a talent development standpoint than from an actual recruiting standpoint?
I do, especially with those last two administrations. Like you said, the talent was never bad at Miami. How much was it developed? How willing to adjust to the modern culture of college football were those last two administrations willing to flex towards? I'm not so sure, but yeah, development was a huge issue at Miami. That's how. It's one program, like it's like Miami and Texas. Texas had 0 draft picks. Miami had 1.
Right.
Like those two, that should never happen. Like there's really no other way to put it. There's really no Pythagorean theorem to dive into as to why. It just should never happen, because you're in this case, you're in the most talented recruiting grounds in the world for the sport of football. So it should never happen at Miami in terms of the NFL draft. Same thing as Texas. So yes, it does reflect on the coaching staffs and a lack of development, because the talent is there. That said, I was surprised Charleston Rambo didn't get drafted in particular. I thought Bubba Bolden had some upside to maybe be picked there in the later rounds. And those were, high-profile transfer wins for the Manny Diaz regime. But obviously it didn't happen, so it reflects ultimately on that group and kind of absorbs a little bit into this group, which is unfair, but that's part of recruiting, right? Perception, dips into multiple coaches at one time. So I do think that's kind of another reminder as to where, hey, this thing is headed in the right direction if you're Miami, but it also takes time, because development is not just about talent acquisition. It's about actually, fostering that towards, something special.
I will say one thing, a player who wasn't drafted, but I think he found kind of an interesting undrafted free agent destination, De'Aaron King to New England. I think there's probably a more likely than not chance he probably won't end up making the team, but it seems like there's possibilities there, right? I mean, he's going to convert to wide receiver, but they can use him as kind of a gimmick player, right? Like I think there's a chance he could actually be kind of a secret weapon at the next level.
I agree with you. The Patriots need juice. I mean, and that was true even with Tom Brady. They've always been a team that has been known for defense and efficiency on offense, and those great Brady teams, there was always this player who was a slot receiver or a running back who wasn't physically dominant. It wasn't, like the Randy Moss team didn't win the Super Bowl. It's the teams with, Troy Brown and Julian Edelman, or a running back he could swing out of the backfield. So I think if King can assimilate towards something like that, which we've obviously seen his top tier athleticism, presuming he's healthy, I do think that there's a potential fit for him. And that's one of those natural moves, quarterback to wide receiver. It gives you that understanding of some of those choice routes that really become effective at any level. And again, New England's kind of known for it. So I do think that there could be some upside and a great story building there. So no surprise to see the Patriots target and plan out something that I guess dramatic. But stranger things have happened in the NFL, and King's story has had a lot of transition and ups and downs. So it would almost be fitting to get into the pro ranks that way.
Coming up next here on Locked On Canes, we'll continue with John Garcia Jr. from Sports Illustrated. NIL, it seems to become a bigger and bigger topic by the day, and there's a lot of people within the business of college football who are not too happy about it, and they want regulation. So we'll get to the bottom of how things may look here in the near future. But my friends, summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Throw a Built Bar in your bags, in your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you are fueled for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and they're delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both. And it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. Built Bars have helped me so much because I've been on a big-time fitness kick and health kick. I've got a sweet tooth. I've been able to replace my candy bars with Built Bars, and they're better. They're better for you, and they're great tasting. All Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. Have you tried the Built Puffs yet? We're going crazy for the Puffs. They come in crazy flavors like banana cream pie and even churro. I mean, who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? Cinco de Mayo yesterday, I had like 7 of them, and they're only 140 calories, man. Sign me up. If that's not enough flavor for you, then you might want to try the mixed box. The mixed box comes with 12 flavors of bars and puffs. Built Bar makes sure that there's something for everyone. You know what my favorite flavor is? Oh, I love the peanut butter chocolate, guys. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories only, just 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Go to Built.com and get all your favorites like banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and so many more. They are delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. Check them out at Built.com. Go to Built.com and use our promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first Miami Hurricanes listen each and every day. We are available free wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Alex Donno alongside John Garcia Jr. from Sports Illustrated. So, John, and this was actually, it's pretty cool, broken by someone at your network. Obviously, Sports Illustrated is an institution. And according to Ross Dellinger at SI, reported yesterday, Pac-12 Commissioner George Klavkov and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey will meet with U.S. senators to fight for a congressional mandate on name, image, and likeness. Now, we all know United States Congress is well known for their efficiency and the speed with which they get things done. But obviously, there are a lot of folks within the business of college football that I don't know, they want reforms or they at least want clarity, John. So what do you expect is going to be the end game here? Because I always felt like the NCAA, they just weren't ready for this. Like, I think they were afraid of, of statutes and laws and getting sued. So they didn't do a whole lot about NIL. And now they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
I love the way you put that. I think the NCAA overcorrected by taking a step back and said, hey, yes, players can profit, just clear it with compliance as long as it's not done, before they got to campus and go ahead, have fun. Obviously, that opens up a Pandora's box, and this is something that especially in the transfer portal, Alex, we're seeing becoming such a major factor in the decisions. I was told, I'm not going to name the kid or the school, but I was told, hey, this kid was all set to dominate 2022 at his old school, probably enter the NFL draft and have a chance to get selected. But there were terms that were presented to him around the time that he hit the transfer portal that made him change his mind altogether. So it's something that if it's happening on a smaller scale, this wasn't a super high profile national guy. Imagine what Jordan Addison is dealing with. Imagine what, JT Daniels, right, who was a quarterback at Georgia and out West Virginia. Imagine what he was dealing with in the transfer portal. Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler. The list goes on and on. So there has to be something to either control it or give other programs a chance to, I don't want to say match, because I think that is something that is certainly, professional in nature. But I do think that there has to be a window as to where things can be defined, clearly defined, as opposed to wide open, because that's really where there's been a lot of discrepancies with the NCAA, which is, par for the course for them. So I think this is just the first step towards going over the NCAA's head and going, straight to the government, because we have seen them intervene at different points with college athletics. And this, again, we talked about it with Jordan Addison. This feels like a tipping point. This feels like, hey, if this doesn't get nipped in the bud or corrected to a degree now, then it's going to remain as wide open as it feels today. And we're still less than a year into it. So we really don't even know how truly wide open it is. But you can talk to a coach at Alabama or a coach in Division III, and they will both tell you, I mean, this thing is crazy and it's the wild, wild west. That's the phrase we get like every week when reporting on this. So I do think that is universally understood. As to where exactly the first change begins, I have no idea. But I do agree that something needs to be done, and this is kind of step one in that process.
I'll tell you what I find maybe to be the craziest thing about NIL, and you can tell me if I'm understanding this improperly, because obviously we've been learning all this stuff on the fly. So when you're implementing NIL correctly and properly, right? The collectives and the coaches, they're not supposed to be communicating. They can't
Right.
sit down at a powwow and the coach is like, okay, these are the players I want, so you better present them with offers. So it's like basically the collectives just have to kind of decide, well, these are the people that I think we like. I don't necessarily know if the coaches like them. And like that to me, like, and I'm sure for the most part, coaches love it when big time recruits are getting enticed with NIL. But then what if they may be out there making offers to players that you don't necessarily need or want?
That's a great question. I do think that's part of the conversation that needs to change, right? That's the clarity. You mentioned clarity earlier. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing. I think even right now, almost a year into it, Alex, I think most fans, if you ask them, hey, who initiates these deals? I think, I don't know, 80% would tell you, well, it's the college coaches, right? It's Jimbo Fisher, it's Josh Heupel, it's Lincoln Riley. Like, no, they can't initiate really any of it. Now, can they confirm things and get it to compliance? Of course, but it's supposed to already have been put on the table. But, I do think that in conjunction with the transfer portal in particular has really become, ground zero in this battle, really for the amateurism and the educational aspect of college, and I've seen wild scenarios thrown out there, everything from get rid of it altogether to, okay, this is here to stay. So now then the major powers are going to leave the whole university element behind, and it's just going to be pure minor league football. I think somewhere in the middle is probably where it ends up. But the fact that these extremes are even being thrown out there, I think does, eliminate the frustration that exists with all of this. And that's why, these commissioners are just getting on jets and they're just going to DC like right now. They're like, screw it. I got to go do something about it.
When we come back, I want to talk about a couple of specific recruiting targets for Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes coming up in 2022. But my friends, you have to be taking advantage of the knowledge and the resources at betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs. My Miami Heat are off to a great start. Major League Baseball and this weekend's Run to the Roses at the Kentucky Derby. Got Formula One this weekend as well in my backyard here in Miami. And my friends, I'm looking at some of the numbers at betonline.net. We finally have the over-under for Hurricanes wins this coming football season, 8.5. You know me, I'm smashing the over. I'm very, very bullish as always. And BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen each and every day. We're available free wherever you get your pods and available on YouTube as well. Joined here by John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting at Sports Illustrated. So, John, a player that I find very interesting, and I guess I would be kind of insulted if he didn't wind up at Miami, given his family lineage. He's the nephew of Tolbert Bain, who won a title at Miami. Ruben Bain, four-star defensive lineman from Miami Central. He's getting crystal balled by a lot of folks to the U. Do you think he ends up signing?
I do think that Miami is in the driver's seat in this recruitment. You mentioned the legacy status. How about the amount of times he's visited? I think 2, 3, 4 days in a row during spring practice, it was like, well, there's Ruben Bain at practice again. So, look, I mean, he's got a clear interest in the current version of the program. We all know about the recruiting prowess, really just on the defensive line alone with Coach Joe, even with Jason Taylor mixed into that. And I think that's really where you could just kind of see him at Miami. I mean, he is a sack artist. I mean, this guy had like 20-plus sacks last year for Miami Central. I don't know what the records are for Dade County, but he's probably, pushing some of them. There is heavy competition, and he's hit some other visits. Alabama, I think Louisville hosted him on campus. Florida State has been in the mix for some time, but really the ball has been in Miami's court. I go back to what I said about Jordan Addison. The timeline, though, that makes everything interesting with Ruben. He appears to be taking his time with the process, which is not something that once I saw all those Miami visits back to back, I did not expect him to say, hey, I'm going to take my time with the process. You would expect more of a late spring, early summer commitment timeline. So if he sticks to taking his time, game on for some of the other schools that are chasing Miami in this conversation. But if he does change his mind and maybe want to wrap things up before his senior season begins, which is very common with rising senior recruits who just want to focus on, in his case, getting back to a state championship game, I do think Miami is the front runner, and I understand why those projections are coming in.
Yeah, and we see Miami is trying to be very aggressive with a lot of 4- and 5-star players, including at the quarterback position, and there's some real studs in the class of 2023. I'm not sure what the timelines are, if they have timelines, either of these. I mean, of course, I would love to see Miami land one of Jaden Rashada or Dante Moore. Is there anything new, John, on where either of them might be leaning and when they're thinking of deciding?
Well, a couple of schools have taken quarterbacks that I do think affect where they may contend for Rashada and Moore, respectively. Rashada was on a visit to Ole Miss, and then the next day, Ole Miss took a quarterback commitment from Marcel Reed from Tennessee. So I think that all but eliminates Ole Miss from consideration from Jaden's perspective, although he's still saying the right things. He's a really nice kid, so he's going to continue to do that. But I do think Miami is absolutely in this conversation. It looks like they'll get another visit before all is said and done. He has talked about trying to get it done before the season begins, but he's not 100% sure on it. It looks like Oregon will be the primary challenger to the Canes, LSU, Arkansas, a couple of others trying to stay in the mix. And then the dark horse is Texas A&M. It's his newest scholarship offer, and they will get a visit. So I know, Oregon, Miami, A&M will get visits. LSU, Arkansas kind of on the outside looking in for Rashada. Same kind of deal as we talked about with Bain. The sooner he does it, the clearer it is for Miami versus Oregon. If he does take the A&M visit and take his time a little bit more, the Aggies could come in as a true, not last minute offer, but a true later to the game option and actually make a pretty quick impact, which we've seen them do coast to coast in the last couple of recruiting cycles. And then with Dante, kind of a different situation. A ton of visits. He just took an official to LSU and Oregon the last 2 weekends. He's got 3 trips left. The consensus is that he's going to take those visits outside of the region that he's from, which is the Midwest. He's a Detroit kid. So if that is the case, I do expect Miami to get an official visit. Now, Dante's timeline is much slower, in my opinion, than Rashada's. I think there are more players involved: Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan still trying to keep him within state lines, as well as the other schools we just mentioned. So I do think that one is a bit of a longer play for Miami. But I think that lines up well for Cristobal and the rest of the coaching staff, because you're going to know where you stand for Rashada before Moore is ready to pop. So if you get Rashada, obviously hey, Dante, we love you, but we understand, you're probably going somewhere else. And then, vice versa. If Rashada picks Oregon, let's say, who is also in it for Dante, now it's kind of all in on Dante Moore. So this class is really crazy at the quarterback position, and it's like every school affects the other. But Miami's involved for really two of the top three remaining in my eyes, with the third being, Arch Manning.
Well, that's great and excellent info as always. You want to make sure you follow John on Twitter at John Garcia_Jr. He is the director of football recruiting for Sports Illustrated. John, again, can't thank you enough. Have a wonderful weekend coming up.
Likewise, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Beautiful stuff there from John Garcia Jr. And my friends, thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen every day. Now make Locked On ACC your second listen of the day. I was a guest on that show this week. Candace does an awesome job. Get all of your daily ACC news in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.